Without further ado, I will ask Professor Payne to come to the podium and to speak to you on the topic of citizenship social work practice. Professor Payne.
Bon dia. Oh, well. If we were in England, I would be saying good afternoon. You may wonder about this list of things that Letty has read out there. This is because I've now become an emeritus professor at Manchester Metropolitan University, so I'm allowed to work in lots of different places. And so I have all these different things that I do. But for the last 10 years, I've been working principally at St Christopher's Hospice. And as you know, hospices are concerned with helping people who are dying and their families and carers. And this leads me to a very important, I think, experience in the latter part of my career, which I want to connect with what we're talking about here today. And that is that social work is a very important aspect of social work, is that it deals with the human part of being a human being. First of all, I start from the idea that humanity, our humanity, and the humanity of the people we work with is a crucial part of what we do. And everything I'm going to talk about today really connects with that experience. And of course, working in a hospice, I'm very conscious of that, because in a hospice, we work with people who do something that we are all, as human beings, going to do. And that is that we are going to die. So I'm very conscious of that. All human beings share at least that. And of course, we were all born. We all became human beings in this great world of ours that Lena has talked about a bit this morning. So I start from that humanity. But in working in Eastern Europe, as many people in Western Europe have been involved in helping Eastern European countries to develop their social work, I'm very conscious that they have been doing very much what I see you doing this week. And that is thinking about what is the right kind of social work for us to have in our country, responding to the history, the culture, and the social systems that we have in our countries. And you've been talking about that a lot this week. I want to celebrate that. I want to celebrate all the work that you're doing in the Caribbean, and especially I want to celebrate our colleagues in Korsou. It's a small island, and I'm accustomed to people saying that Britain is a small island, England is a small island, but it's nothing like as small as Curacao. Haven't they all worked hard to help us and support us and keep us going, and to be creative and imaginative in what they're doing? So thank you to our colleagues in Curacao for what they've done for us. So, I've talked about the human in social work, and we're all conscious of that as we deal with people and in day-to-day life. But we've also been talking about human rights and domestic violence and the experience of women and greening social work this morning. And we just had from Dr. Chinchilla something about the great trends in thinking that go on within social work. So, how do we make the connection between these great social issues that we have to be concerned with? Human rights, with human identity, with the place of women in society, all these important social issues. How do we connect that with that humanity that we deal with And the connection that I try to make is with the idea of citizenship. That we are all citizens in the places and the countries that we live in the same way that we all have a flag, and we all see ourselves as being a member of or participating in a particular society. So I want to say that, keeping in your mind the idea that this person you are dealing with is a citizen helps you to connect the human with these great social issues and social trends. And I want to use that. And that causes me to start with talking a little bit about what citizenship is. We know that citizenship is a status. We are citizens of our country. And it's also identity. Nearly all people have it, and it denotes affiliation with a country. And it comes from how we're born, or where we direct our lives during our lifetimes. I'm very sorry that my wife is not able to be here today and this week at this conference. She would have loved to have been here and wanted to be here, but it just so happens that our son and daughter-in-law are having a baby this week. Our daughter-in-law is in hospital at the moment, and my wife is caring for her children whilst her husband is with her. We have every hope that today or tomorrow we will have our 11th grandchild. But that grandchild will have a flag and a country and a place right from that moment. The identity will be partly with her parents and her brothers and sisters and her family, but it will also be with that territory, with their citizenship. And that recognises a legal connection with the country, but it also includes being part of a culture, being part of an economy, being part of a politics, being belonging in a social way. And with that belonging goes the right to participate politically, to vote, to take part in elections, to participate in relationships with other people, with her family, his family, which we don't know whether it's going to be a boy or a girl. So with her family first of all, and then in her school, and in her relationships with all sorts of other citizens. So citizenship recognises this kind of legal connection, but it also recognises the social, political and economic connection. It connects that identity with that national legal status. And it implies rights and duties. And though that belonging, those rights and duties, imply inclusion. Our granddaughter or son will be included in that identity of being British. But that also means a worry for us that it means also exclusion from her or his citizenship connection for non-citizens, for people who are not part of Britain. And so belonging and not belonging is an important ambiguity in the basic political, social, legal, personal identity that we have. I belong to Britain, I belong to social Europe, I belong to Europe. In a way, I belong to the world, but in another way, I'm excluded from the world. I'm excluded in various ways, which have been mentioned this week. When I go to Poland to teach at the Polish university that I work at, I'm excluded because I can't speak Polish very well. Dziękuję means thank you. Dzień dobry means good day in the same way that bon dia does. But I'm not very good at that side, so I'm excluded in some ways. And that's a cultural exclusion as well as a legal and political exclusion. So our identity is connected with this national citizenship, and our self, who I am, who I'm me, identifies me as belonging to a particular culture and nation, but also as not belonging to a particular culture and nation, as not having the identity with other countries. So I can love being in Korsou. This is my second time. I'm delighted to be here. But I'm not part of it. I'm excluded in a very real way. People have been wonderful. People have been lovely. But I am excluded. And so it's important to recognise that our essential identity, recognised in our citizenship, is a belonging, but it's also an exclusion. And this is an ambiguity, an uncertainty, an unclarity. It's something which might imply conflict and difficulty, and we need to understand that. We're given this legal status, one of these things. In order to come here, we have to provide it. In order to get back, we have to provide it. And that gives us rights to participation in politics and government. So it has all sorts of implications. Citizenship provides a structure. It organises our societies. It organises the world. It creates a social order. It connects a population with a territory, connects people in Korsou with this island territory. And it connects that population, those people, those human beings, with the right to control that territory and to participate in its economic, political and social life. And as a result, it creates relationships of power between people in that country. So citizenship structures us and creates power. There's a famous analysis of social citizenship. So we've talked about political and legal citizenship, national citizenship, but social citizenship with three important sets of rights. The civil right to legal protection, freedom and equality. The political rights to vote, to stand for election, participate in political processes, and the social rights to receive welfare services and to participate in social relations with others. Marshall was first writing in the publication date is 1949. He was first writing at the time when there was this great concern to establish welfare states that Professor Shinjia was referring to earlier. This analysis now seems to us to be flawed in some ways, because it attaches the rights for our citizenship to the state. It connects upwards and says the state is what gives us our rights. Whereas we would like to say, wouldn't we, that our rights come from our humanity, from being human beings together and sharing and participating together. So this concern with citizenship, with rights, which we see when we look at migration and immigration, means that there are contested values about the role of the state. What services should the state be providing, and what should be the matter for the individual? And is this an exchange? Is the state entitled to make demands on us? In some countries, you must spend some time in the army, or the navy, or the air force. You have a responsibility to contribute to the economy. In some countries, you're required by law to take part in elections. So what demands can be made of you if you are a citizen? And what opportunities and rights do you have as a result of being citizens? And are those absolute, or is it an exchange? Do you get your rights and opportunities if you make some kind of contribution, if you participate? This raises the question of how clear is it, really, the identity that we give ourselves as citizens, how clear is it in our relationship with the state. And one of the important philosophies which think about these issues is the idea of communitarianism. And communitarianism says, well, that citizenship is always two-sided. You're a member, people from Curacao are citizens of Curacao, and with that membership, there are rights to receive services and to enjoy participation. But if you're going to do that, then there are also responsibilities. You feel responsible for Curacao. You are responsible for participation in the country and making it work. Now, there are two ways in which you can approach communitarianism. Radical communitarians see this concept of citizenship as a criticism of individualism. A radical communitarian says, well, if rights and responsibilities go together, therefore, it is inevitable as citizens that we must cooperate together. The cooperation is what being a citizen is all about. But there is another view, which is often called conservative communitarianism. And conservative communitarians see it not as an opportunity for cooperation, but as a demand for appropriate behaviour. People only get the rights of citizenship and the benefits if they also make a contribution. This leads to the idea of conditionality. Your benefits are a condition of what? What have you got to do to get your benefits as a citizen? And increasingly, governments are beginning to take this conservative communitarian view of citizenship. Yes, you're a citizen, provided that you do the things that are expected. And sometimes what's expected is a financial contribution, or a contribution which is about taking part in the economy and making the economy grow and develop and making money for the state and business. And sometimes that conditionality is about other things which you are required to do. So, increasingly, we see in many societies this conservative view which says, if we're going to be part of this community together as citizens, we have to step up to the mark. We have to make a contribution. We have to do things. And for social workers, this raises some important questions. What does it mean for people who, through no fault of their own, can't make those contributions? Or who are in circumstances which mean that they're not able to make the contributions that they would like to make? Many young people in European societies now are unable to work. They would like to do so, but the economic system in which the state plays a part has failed to offer them the opportunity to work. So can they be blamed for failing to work? Well, the conservative communitarian view is yes. It's their fault because they're not working. Never mind that the economy or the state has failed to provide the economic and social opportunities for work. And so, the inability to make a contribution means that you become an excluded person, in much the same way as you become an excluded person by not being a citizen. And what does conditionality mean for people who are not citizens? It means, in the case of migrants perhaps, send them back home. Cut them out. Don't give them the advantages of membership in our state. And increasingly, countries are beginning to say, well, actually, we can't afford to have all these people migrating. And a colleague mentioned yesterday in relation to Canada. Yes, governments governments are beginning to say, well, we only want the rich people who are going to make a contribution. We don't want the poor people who need our help, who need our citizenship. We'll have the rich people who can make their contribution. So conditionality is leading to a political system which excludes people on the basis of their citizenship and does not take the cooperative, positive view of that we might take about citizenship. So, citizenship has implications for human rights. The ambiguity, the complexity, the uncertainty comes from the fact that citizenship includes us, but it excludes people also. And this conditionality, this conservative view of the role of the state and the role of citizenship begins to raise questions about whether being a human being is universal. Well, actually, we should accept human rights because they're universal. And there's been, in sociology, some debate about this issue, and I need to mention the work of Habermas, who talks about cosmopolitization. Cosmopolitanization. Cosmopolitanization. And what he argues is that by incorporating ideals of human rights through the International Human Rights Code into local law, that increases solidarity in any particular society. So the purpose of all these legal processes for human rights, concern with domestic violence, the concern with the rights of women, the concern with the rights of all kinds of minorities. These rights, by being included in local law, mean that we can accept the universality of human rights. But, again, this is being questioned. And in particular, it's being questioned in areas where we all, or many of us, work. Social work is, in many countries, part of the state. It's part of a set of organisations and agencies in which we provide services on behalf of the state to our citizens, and sometimes to people who might potentially be excluded. Increasingly, we are operating under what is nowadays called new public management, and a colleague earlier in the week called it managerialism. It's the same thing. It's the idea that the most important thing is to manage things properly. It comes from a view that management is different from the professional work that we do. Things can be managed efficiently and economically in accordance with the law, and that's different from dealing with human beings. And so social work, its concern with humanity and with caring and helping, is not relevant to the management of public services for social care. This new public management does all sorts of things, but a good example of it is this concern with risk management. Somehow or other, you've got to manage risks so that people don't become problems. Very often, this form of management is about managing the risks for agencies rather than for our service users. And I've put some points here which comes from the work of Mo Ray in working with older people. What she and her colleagues suggest is that instead of thinking about risk assessment, we should be going and looking at whether someone is at risk. We should be thinking much more clearly about whether we can provide evidence of risk, whether we've analysed carefully what risks people are at, and whether there might be desirable outcomes from their taking risks. Older people, very often happy to take risks in their lives in order to maintain their social relationships, rather than to be pushed into a highly protected environment. I've been writing about this issue from a humanistic point of view, and what I argue is that what we should try to do as social workers in our practice is to focus on creating security, not in assessing risk, to avoid surveillance and trying to enhance freedom rather than trying to control risk. This slide here is one which I very often use with my students to talk about AT. AT is called assistive technology, and it's the kind of technology that we nowadays use to enable people to stay in their own homes. And this is one slide of several, so I'm just going to give you one example for it. And what I want to refer to is these things here, activity monitors. Now, if you look at the diagram, you'll see that the activity monitor number 5 are in front of the elderly lady here on the table in front of her table. And that's where the technology, this gadget here that I've got in front of me, the laptop is. But the activity monitors go into different rooms. And the way in which it works is, if you're elderly and at home and at risk, the activity monitor tells a central control room which monitors hundreds of old people whether or not you have moved in a certain period. So if you put an activity monitor in somebody's bedroom and they don't move in the morning, you send out a van with somebody to check whether they're all right. And if they don't then go into the bathroom and get washed, then that's another risk that you've got to go in and check for. And if they then don't go into the kitchen and make their breakfast, then you're really worried about whether this old person is still up and about and doing the things she ought to. Well, I'm an old person, I'm over 65. Frankly, there are some mornings in which I prefer not to get up. I hear the alarm and I think, no. And my wife will be embarrassed by me telling you this, but there are some mornings when I think, oh, I can't be bothered to have a shower. I'll just miss out the shower thing. And there are some mornings when I think to myself, well, I don't think I'll bother with breakfast this morning. And what these activity monitors are saying is, you've got to have this routine, which is the healthy routine, and we're going to check whether you're going to do it. And what this draws attention to is that, yes, this is helpful, and it helps the older person stay in their own home when otherwise the risks might be too great. But it also intrudes. And do you remember we had a discussion earlier in the week, I can't remember whether it was in one of these big sessions or one of the smaller sessions, about intervention. Should we be talking about intervention, or should we be talking about helping and caring? Well, it's very clear with these kinds of systems that in order to pursue our concern with risk management, what we are doing is intruding. I try not to talk about intervention because I think that's a very professionalised kind of term. What we are doing is intruding upon people's lives. And I don't want people checking whether I've got up when I'd rather go to sleep, thank you very much. I don't want people checking whether I've made my breakfast. I don't want that intrusion in my life. So we have to, although this is helpful to people, we need to be very careful about the extent of intrusion. And it's this kind of management approach that it's important to control the risks, to manage things, rather than to think about, well, what does this human being want? What do they want to feel secure about? They're perhaps not all that worried about whether they get up in the morning, but perhaps they want to feel secure about something else. So I've come to the end of the beginning set of points that I wanted to make about citizenship. We have this idea of citizenship which is about belonging, but it contains this ambiguity, this uncertainty, which tells us that perhaps we can, by being included, we're also excluding people. And this has led to the state trying to assume control of the risks, and through in the social world, to try to assume control of the risks that affect us in our social lives. And so this leads to intrusion. And I think this is an area of citizenship which we ought to be concerned about. This is to talk about some of the value principles in social work. And it comes from an analysis in my book, Modern Social Work Theory. And you'll be thinking, well, modern social work theory doesn't contain this. Well, it doesn't, because the new edition is coming out the beginning of next year, and it will contain this. And by looking at a whole range of social work theories, I've tried to extract some of the principles that we share in all sorts of theories. And I'm just going to talk about one of them, because I take me hours to talk about all five. But let's think about critical thinking. A lot of social work theory currently talks about the way in which we should use disruption. And in fact, some of our colleagues have talked about it this week. We should not accept the current status quo. We should look to disrupt people's assumptions so that they can begin to change. But this is another intrusion. It means that we're intruding upon people's steady path through life and wanting to change them, whereas perhaps they don't want that. Perhaps they would prefer not to be disrupted. On the other hand, other people need that disruption and want to have it. So what the idea of citizenship does, when it looks at social work values, it says, well, what does this mean for people's rights as a citizen? What does this mean? Does this exclude people in some way? And so I find that the idea of citizenship, if I remember this person in front of me as a citizen, should I be disrupting their lives? In what ways will it be helpful? In what ways will it be unhelpful in our common humanity that we share? Now, some of these ideas about citizenship and social work actually come from the field of working with older people, and they concern a critique of the medical approaches which are very common in working with older people. The medical approach to working with older people is that as we age, we become increasingly decrepit and very difficult to cope with life. And so we've got to try and stop that happening. And if it does happen, we've got to make sure that people don't suffer from those problems. And the role of social work in such an approach is to help the doctors manage the social consequences of the conditions of old age. But a social approach to ageing takes a different view. It says, well, what we've got to do is to help people manage the social relationships that are affected by our aging. I'm going to give you one example. We would like people, older people, to do healthy things, to go swimming occasionally, to keep themselves fit. And in Britain, the way in which they do that is we don't have this wonderful coastline and opportunities for swimming. So people go to leisure centres. And there's some government research which looked into why older people don't go to leisure centres. And one of the older people who responded to the investigation had this phrase, which I think is delightful. An old lady who was concerned with ladies in lycra. What she didn't like about going swimming or doing healthy things was that all around her were these stunning young women in tight costumes. Able to looking stunning. And the lady felt, oh, well, I'm not quite up to that standard. And so she wouldn't go to leisure centres because of ladies in lycra. So the result of that is that we begin to think about, well, how do we behave towards older people? Do we make them feel a little bit decrepit and not very healthy? Do we make facilities for them to be with people they feel safe and they feel good about? So that's what a social approach to working with older people would be. And a citizenship approach would go further and would say, it's also our job, not just to help them do things that they might want to do,
but to help them to participate in society and make a contribution. And the final part of what I'm wanting to say is to talk to you about a schools project programme that we operate at our hospice in London. Hospice, you say? Well, hospice is about older people who are dying. Why would a hospice need a schools project? What's schools got to do with hospices? Well, when we talk to the people that we work with, they say to us that they experience quite a lot of social isolation in the period as they run up to their death. In their families, the children are kept away from them. You don't want to disturb Granny, she's not very well. The parents think they don't want their children in touch with someone who's dying. So the dying person becomes isolated. And also their friends don't visit them because the friends, we ask them and they say, well, I don't quite know what to say to someone. I know that they're dying. What do I say to someone who's dying? And you can understand this because the dying people are very often concerned with their symptoms, with their pain, with their physical problems. So they don't, and they're stuck at home being cared for, so they don't actually have much to talk about, much exciting to discuss. So you can understand why people think, well, actually, we've got to protect the children from this. So what we find is that our society organises itself to isolate dying people, older people who are dying, and we all participate in isolating older people who are dying. So this schools project is part of a process of doing this. And what we do is we ask our local schools if they would like to send a class of children about the age of 10 to come and meet our patients, visit the hospice, and learn something about dying. Well, of course, this creates problems because the school has to ask the children's parents whether they're prepared to take part in this. And the parents say, oh, no, we don't want our children meeting dying people. In fact, one of the teachers said to me that it was a bit like sex education. If you ask the parents, do you want to educate their children in how to do sex? The other parents say, no, thank you very much. I don't want my children knowing too much about that. We'll deal with that ourselves. And my experience is that perhaps we never get quite round to it. That was my childhood experience. And it's the same, the teacher said to me, with death. Parents don't want children knowing about sex, and they don't want them knowing about death either. So this is a difficult task. So we get permissions, and eventually we get a class of young people who come to the hospice, and they have an introductory session in which the children interview the dying people about their lives, and they learn something positive about the life experience of these older people. And then in the second week, the older people visit the school and they work jointly with the young people in an arts project. And then they come back the following week in the hospice and the children work with the older people on the same arts project. And the week after that, they have a big party. I'm sorry, it's not like a cocktail party. In England, we have tea parties. So they have tea and cakes. But the older people and the children have a celebration of the art that they have created together. And the parents come. So the parents learn that actually it's quite okay for their children to work with older people. And so here are some young people with some of our older people doing some artwork together. And of course, you worry about this because you worry what the children's reaction will be. I was there when a boy said to an older patient, not this lady as it happens, he said, "Why are you so wrinkled?" And what that shows you is that by bringing people into this, they can ask questions they're not allowed to ask anywhere else. And my reaction was, oh goodness, what are we going to do? You can't go around saying that to older people. But the lady's response was very interesting. She said, well, if you laugh, you get a laugh line in your face. And if you've led a happy life like me, I thought this was wonderful. If you've led a happy life like me, all your happiness is in lines on your face. I thought that was just wonderful, and how people can rise to these occasions. So they have a great time. This lady's doing mosaic, and they produce a product. I've got to go through the pages to know what I'm doing. Well, you might ask why we deal with arts projects. The first thing we would say about that is that it's a vital human activity. You look at the flowers, the arts work around this building. Having art here is an important part of the experience we've had being here in this building today. And it's an important part of everybody's life. It enhances people's stability to do things creatively. It is a personal enrichment and self-fulfillment. Even if you're very old, and even if you're going to die next week, you can still create things. And if you're finding things a bit depressing, it's a diversion from that too. It's interesting, it's engaging. And it allows you to talk, to communicate. It allows these older people and children to communicate about the wrinkles and the happiness. And you can also do it as a psychotherapy in a form way. So, what this project does is bring two lots of citizens, young citizens and old dying citizens, together, puts them together and says, you share being creative people, you share humanity, you share being human beings together, being creative human beings together. And so this is a way in which you can bring together from different aspects of citizenship who would otherwise be isolated and excluded. You can bring them together and create something. There are lots of other ways of being involved in citizenship thinking, to be concerned about social issues, to think about social justice interventions, and there have been many of you who have been talking about the importance of social justice as a way of looking at people's citizenship. Individual social justice interventions, and I rather like this analysis by Sismos and his colleagues of multicultural work, because what he says is that societies, by which he means the societies in which we are citizens, are patchworks of overlapping stories and perspectives and worldviews. And we know this, don't we? Our identity is created through, examples are here, gender, sex, ethnicity, sexual orientation, spirituality, our abilities, our competencies, our socioeconomic status, our national origin. All of these things create our identity, which then has social consequences, sometimes of privilege and power, and lack of power, but whatever. If we see people's stories of their lives as creating their identity, by working on people's identity in relationship to one another, we can begin to bring together people in a very important way. These are the citations, references I've been using, and I'm going to put this back on the screen when I get to the end. But I just want to invite you to, if you want to contact me, this is my email address. You can follow me on Twitter, 3,000 other people do. Or you can look at my blogs on end of life care, on self-positioning, which is a way of looking at where you position yourself in your life. Or you can, on my blog on social care and older people. But I'd like to finish by, this is the celebratory photograph, and this is the mosaic that these people created. They created a mosaic which included the badge of the school up there on the left, and some of the life experience of the older people. Now, took this photograph a little while ago, and all of the older people here have now died. But in their last few days and weeks, they were able to participate with young people and with parents and teachers and nurses and other people. They were able to participate in creating something which will help these young people develop in their citizenship as participants in society. Even in the last days of their lives, they were able to participate. And I say that what social work should be all about is helping people to participate as citizens with other citizens. That is our shared humanity. To be together, and as our profession is to enable people to be together, and not just to be together, but to contribute, to participate, to be part of. Here is how.